Tiffany Rogers. I'm 27 years old. I work for the New York Asian Women's Center. I think I'm here today to show my support as a person and also an Asian American person. I think there has been a divide in our communities. I think I do see still kind of some pervasive racism among Asian Americans towards other communities of color. But I think there are a lot of commonalities in our experience and a lot of ways in which we can show our support and empathy for each other. And that is why I've decided to come.
Thank you. And what's your ethnic background?
I'm a Korean American adoptee.
My name's Aditi Bhattacharya. I am 35 years old, born and raised in India, and I work like Tiffany, who spoke to you earlier. I work with the New York Asian Women's Center. As someone who is a person of color, I come here because I want to show solidarity with people who have a history of being persecuted for their skin color and a history in this country where freedom is oftentimes fraught with violence. And I can't see any good reason why, in the interests of maintaining law and order, people who are committed to quote-unquote serve and protect do exactly the opposite. For a very long time, to African American populations in this country and in this city, and it is wrong. And I cannot for once pretend that I know what the impact of this history is with all of the black people that are here. But what I do know from my knowledge of having worked within areas of violence and trauma is that generation upon generation, if you are taught to be afraid, if your independence, your agency and your dignity is constantly trampled, at some point in time you end up being a ghost of the person that you're supposed to. And it is wrong. And people are entitled to protest, people are entitled to speak for their humanity, for their rights. And so, as a person of color and as someone who does not like violence, I am here to show my support to the African American people here.
My name is Sarah Rosenblum. I am 34 years old. This is Ty Washington Brown, and he is 2.5 years old. And we are out here today because I am Caucasian, I'm white, and as white as can be. And my husband, his father is African American, and so he is African American. And Ty has 2 older brothers and an older sister. An older brother who is 18, an older brother who's 13, and an older sister who's 11. And they're all African American. And we're here because Moali got stopped for the first time by the police last week. And it's not fair. And it's not fair that Ty is going to negotiate a world where he's going to be both black and white, and it's going to be a totally different experience than his brothers, and it's not fair. And so we're here because we want justice, and it is not just the way people are treated differently by the police.
Hi, my name is David. I'm a Chinese American. My parents are first generation. And I'm here to show my support. I think it's outrageous, the events that have happened recently. And I think there's a quote by Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think, even though I'm an Asian American and the recent events in Ferguson don't affect me directly, I still am a minority in this country, and I feel that, justice is absolutely very, very important to me in terms of racial discrimination is a big issue that affects not just African Americans but also Asian Americans. And in fact, I think the narrative often diverges. Asian Americans are often held up as this model minority type of image that are supposed to be very, very different from African Americans. And it's not just race is the issue. The stories that some races have got to figure it out and other races have issues. But really, I think Asian American history is full of protests and full of discrimination and people fighting for their rights. And I think it's a lot of the same shared history that affects all groups, not just African Americans. So I think it makes a lot of sense that I'm out here showing my support.
My name is Alice. I'm 23 and I'm Chinese American. My parents came as immigrants to this country, and I'm here as a law student who's passionate about social justice and as a minority that is part of a group that has historically been discriminated against very heavily in the US. And one thing that's really struck me in studying social justice and in being in law school is that if you look at the Chinese Exclusion Act, if you look at Japanese internment, this is something that really has affected Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, pretty much every sort of Asian American as well, in the sense of this sort of sense that America is not necessarily for everybody and that certain classes of people can be discriminated against and treated differently. And I think that's what we've been seeing recently with all of these cases. And that's why I think it's so important for us to take a stand and as Asian Americans also show our support that we believe in equality and we believe that all lives matter.
What's a middle-aged Korean guy from suburbia doing in Washington Square Park at the Millions March? And I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've never been to a demonstration before, but I felt compelled to come out because just looking at all the things that have been happening lately, it just it really moved me to take some action, because the alternative is to feel helpless. And I've been thinking a lot about lately about the kingdom of God. As a Christian person, I've been thinking about what that means, and I've come to think that kingdom of God means a kingdom where God's justice reigns and where human injustice doesn't. Injustice done to one group is an injustice done to everyone. And we as human beings who share common humanity should all be outraged at the injustice that we experience. So I guess I want to encourage my fellow Korean Americans and other Asian Americans to really start thinking about these issues as not someone else's problems, but really an issue that we need to address as a community.